he always says you can't stop the waves from coming in life, but you can learn to surf them. You're not going to ever have this perfect life where nothing outside of you affects you. So it's about skilling yourself up to have the tools and practices to be able to cope with those and to maintain your composure and your calm, even when the world around you is anything but.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Generation Exceptional podcast. I'm joined today by Karen Janes, who I've known for probably about a year now. I know you joined my program a little while ago, and Karen is I think to call you a mindfulness teacher is probably doing you a bit of a disservice, because I think there's so much more to what you do than that, that one word mindfulness. And I'm really interested to have this conversation today because I'm a big advocate for looking after people in the workplace. From my background was in supporting women through menopause, but there are so many other factors in life that can have an impact on our well-being, our mental and our physical well-being. And I know I'm going to get you to tell us in a moment, but you work with businesses and individuals to help them manage their physical and their mental well-being through mindfulness and how do you put it? Brain-based tools, which I love. So, Karen, welcome to the episode. I'm going to hand over to you just for a few minutes, just to tell us a little bit about you and your journey. Obviously, we're Generation Exceptional. That's the essence of this podcast. I think most of us have some sort of turning point in our lives, some point at which life takes a different direction. And I'd love you to share when that turning point happened for you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's lovely to see you here and join your podcast in this way. So thank you. Yes, I was working in the charity sector for most of my career. So for about 20 years, I was working in that sector and absolutely loving it, really passionate and driven. And I moved up through the ranks to a senior leader, and I was working for a national charity. And I was there for about 13 years, absolutely loving it, building a team from scratch, made a huge progress. And then I was really loving it until I wasn't anymore. And I don't know that it crept up on me without me really realizing it, that I wasn't really getting as much out of it or enjoying it as much. And it was really interesting because one day I remember I was already starting to have some doubts about whether I was enjoying it anymore, whether I still wanted to do this. And we were going through some changes in our organization that affected my team quite a lot. And I remember one day I went to the hairdresser and I'm sat there in the hairdresser's chair and she's innocently asking me, how am I this week? And I just burst into a flood of tears, very embarrassing, because I was feeling really bad and I hadn't really allowed myself the chance to realize that. So the following week, I went to the chiropractor for another appointment and the same thing happened. She said, oh, how's work today? And again, burst into a flood of tears. And I guess that's when the penny dropped for me. And I realized, oh, perhaps this isn't what I want to be doing anymore. And something's obviously wrong. With a tiny bit of bullying from my family and loved ones, I decided that I needed to go to the doctor and get some time off from work. And I was diagnosed with a really mild to moderate sense of work-related depression and anxiety. It was a huge shock because I'd always felt like I was pretty positive and pretty well established at looking after my own health and well-being. So it was a huge shock and I really fought against it. I didn't want to take time away from work. I had all these responsibilities. I was in a leadership role. You didn't take time off. You just motored on. But yeah, all these signs just showed me that I couldn't really motor on through this one. So if we move on then a couple of months, I'd taken sick leave. I'd done lots of programs and lots of practices and received lots of help and support, like counselling and CBT and lots of different techniques to try and improve my well-being. And I was feeling pretty strong. So I went back to work feeling like I was ready to go back. And I was there for about 2 days. And then I had my first meeting, my return to work meeting with my manager. And I won't go into what she said specifically, but nonetheless, at the end of that conversation, I absolutely crumbled again. And I just realized at that moment that I couldn't work there anymore. I couldn't work for her anymore. I didn't feel like she understood the journey I'd been on through this sort of mental health illness. I could see quite clearly that she wasn't going to be able to support me in what I needed from her. But also with hindsight and now with greater time and space between that event and me, I realized that I wasn't strong enough to have gone back to work. I rushed back thinking that through a sense of sort of duty and responsibility, and I wasn't in the right place. So it wasn't her fault at all. It was just a combination of factors. But nevertheless, she wasn't skilled enough to deal with, she didn't have the tools and practices to support me back at work. And I didn't have them either. I thought I was fine and I could just bounce back and be my old self, and I really couldn't. So that's when I left. I decided to leave. And I think I probably left about 3 months afterwards. And then shortly after I left, the pandemic hit. So there I am for the first time ever, unemployed, no money coming in, and no chance to get a new job. And also still feeling pretty bad from this sort of mental health episode that was such a shock to me. I just focused on myself and my family, keeping us safe, took a longer period of time off. And I guess that was the silver lining for me in the pandemic, was that I couldn't just go and get another job. So I had this protracted length of time where I could really focus on myself, my well-being, my health, and decide what was next for me. And then as part of that, I just stumbled across an invitation to attend an online conference, because you know how they were doing so much free stuff in the early days of the pandemic. And so I went along to this conference and I couldn't believe it. So it was a total eye opener for me. So it was about organizations, global organizations that were using mindfulness techniques in the workplace, and how significant they were at not only improving the well-being of their teams, but helping them to deliver high performance, to increase the bottom line, to deal with lots of the challenges and difficulties that as a senior leader I'd been dealing with, and I know lots of my colleagues had been dealing with for a long time, without really finding a sustainable solution. I was hooked. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This It uses mindfulness, which I'm really passionate about. It was the only thing during my whole well-being journey that supported me in a consistent and sustainable way to be healthy and well. And people were using it in the workplace to deal with all the challenges that I'd confronted as I went through my career. So it just seemed like the perfect fit. So off I went to get trained to be a workplace mindfulness facilitator. And I was just thinking, if only my manager had some of these tools in place when I'd been through that journey, and if only I'd had more of those tools and practices in place, and the organization had that space to allow me to explore those and use them in the workplace, my journey could have ended in a very different way.
And of course, the organisation wouldn't have lost a valued
Yes,
employee. That's the issue for businesses, isn't it? I noticed
exactly.
you have this wonderful turn of phrase in your bio where you say you take care of your people so that they can take care of their business when you go into businesses. And I think that's sometimes missed, isn't it? I remember when I was going through the issues that I had through menopause, which interestingly, there's so much overlap in what you're telling me. And
Okay.
I put that down to menopause. When I look back retrospectively now with hindsight, I also put that down to ADHD. I'd just become a grandma. My kids were growing up and leaving, and there was this sort of void, this gap almost. And it was a
Yes.
very challenging time. My husband was coming out of the Air Force. There's so much going on that sometimes it's hard to
Mm.
pinpoint. And I guess where I'm going with this is I tended to focus on one area of menopause, but with so many other life factors that happen, people need support at all times in their career, don't they? So it's not, these practices that you're learning on, or that you were learning and that you're now teaching, they're there for almost for prevention rather than cure. Would that be fair?
Yes, absolutely. I guess they do both, right? If you're in a really good place, you've got a really strong core of equanimity. So when life happens around you, you're able to just keep going, rely on that strength, core inner strength that I get through mindfulness and through some of the self care techniques that I do. Then you're able to bounce back more easily and you're able to sustain these challenges and crises. In fact, John Kabat-Zinn always says, he's one of the main guys in the mindfulness world. He always says you can't stop the waves from coming in life, but you can learn to surf them. You're not going to ever have this perfect life where nothing outside of you affects you. So it's about skilling yourself up to have the tools and practices to be able to cope with those, and to maintain your composure and your calm, even when the world around you is anything but
Mm. And
calm and
I think
composed.
that's the challenge, isn't it? I think my younger self would have said about any kind of meditative practice or mindfulness practice, I probably wouldn't have had the words for these practices then. Would
Mm.
have been, what is the point? Because I'm still going to have this responsibility, that responsibility. I'm still going to have piles of work I've got to get through. I'm still going to have da. So I'd have probably been quite cynical. I think I was, you can tell me this, you can tell me to do these things, but the stressors don't disappear. So can we just take a little back step just for anybody actually who doesn't know what mindfulness is. I know I tend to get mindfulness and meditation mixed up. I tend to think
Hmm.
of them as one and the same thing, and I don't believe they are. Can you give us, I was going to say, an idiot's guide to mindfulness, but that sounds a bit derogatory, doesn't it? But a simple,
Yes.
what is mindfulness?
A beginner's guide to mindfulness is what you
That's
asked.
a much nicer way of putting it than an idiot's guide. A beginner's guide to mindfulness. Yes, let's go with that.
Yeah. It's interesting because mindfulness has become so popular and it's in common day language lots now, but there's so much to it and there's so many different aspects to it. So that's why I tend to use not necessarily the words mindfulness, but brain based tools and practices because there's such a range of the things that I can offer people. Anyway, yes, so back to what is mindfulness. So mindfulness is the awareness that arises, the self awareness that arises when you're paying attention to the moment to moment experience of your life. So you're noticing your thoughts, your emotions, sensations in your body in the actual moment that they're happening. And with that comes an attitudinal quality of curiosity and openness and trying to set aside any judgment. Sounds very simple, but it's actually quite hard to do because we often come at any sort of new experiences or people or things with like preconceived notions of what it's going to be like based on our past experiences, our expectations, our beliefs. So, actually, when we bring this lens of mindfulness to the world and we're really noticing things as they are, it can be very different to what we first imagined or expected. So, mindfulness then is really about sorry, bringing all of your mental energy into the here and now, so you live each moment, experience everything as it actually is rather than as your naughty brains possibly telling you it could or should be.
No, so I was just going to say, I'm thinking from a physiological point of view. If we're stressing about what has been, living in the past almost, there's a real
Yes.
risk of the whole what ifs, oh, I should have done, and this sort of
Yes.
self-flagellation almost around our failings. And I guess the
Mm.
alternative to that is to be future pacing, which is where the anxiety often comes in, isn't it? Thinking about what
Yes.
might happen and worrying about what may or may not occur. So when we're thinking about calming that sympathetic nervous system, that kind of cortisol, adrenaline, feeling
Hmm.
stressed type of physiology, it's very hard to feel that stress if you're in the moment because you're not worrying about what you should have done and you're not worrying
Yes.
about what could happen in the future. So talk me through the science, if you like. I've given my kind of understanding of it. Give me the science behind what's happening in the body that makes the difference. So it's not just it doesn't matter that the stressors are still there. This is about how we handle them. What's the science going on there?
Excuse me. Yes, I'm not a neuroscientist, I might just add before we go into this part of the conversation, but you've explained it really well. When we're and actually it's really interesting because the point you raised is really helpful because it's something like I think it's 50% of the time our minds are distracted away from what we're trying to focus on. So almost half of our energy is either ruminating on the past or worrying about the future, exactly as you've said. And so then you're caught in this sort of world of rumination or worry. And all that does really is add more suffering to whatever the situation is you're worrying or ruminating about. And if it's worrying about the future, that's how anxiety comes along because you don't know if that's ever going to happen and you don't know what it's going to look like or be like or what the result of it will be. It's really easy to get caught up in that sort of mind trap of worry. And then in the end, you could be worrying about something that never happens. So it's a total waste of time. But yeah, that's just my bugbear about worry. When we're in these stressful situations, quite rightly, we're triggered. So we've got this amygdala in our brain. It's like the smoke detector for threats that are going to be challenging our health and our safety and our well-being. And it goes back to years and years ago at the start when we first were humans. We would be out in the field or away from our tribes, and an animal would come along and pose a real serious threat to our lives. And so this amygdala sends all of these signals to our body to go into this fight, flight, or freeze response, which is the sympathetic nervous system that you just mentioned. And cortisol, adrenaline floods around the body. We get ready to fight or flee. So our bodies all stiffen up and all of our blood flow goes to our arms and our legs to respond. And as we're doing that, we're switching off parts of our system. So we're switching off our immune system, we're switching off our relaxation response, our digestion, anything that we don't need to fight or flee from the big threat. And then the idea is if we've chased off tiger. Everyone always uses saber-toothed tiger when they talk about this. I don't know why, but maybe that was the biggest threat at the time. Or whatever the threat is, once that threat's gone away, our body's supposed to come back into equilibrium. So our nervous system goes back into a normal equilibrium state. So how it does that is it switches off the sympathetic and into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the other side of it, which is around rest, relaxation, digestion, immune. So what we're doing often with the mind-based tools that I teach is we're switching our body into that parasympathetic nervous system ourselves, because it's very easy. So we've got this ability, natural ability to recover from stressful events very quickly. But the way we live our lives now, there's just so much stress coming, so many challenges and demands and changes in our work life, but also outside, that we're not giving ourselves that time to come back into balance before the next stress arrives often. So we're in this sort of state of chronic stress. So instead of we're bobbling along in life, a stressful event arises, we get triggered into the stress response, and then we recover and we bobble along again. So this is the way our mind is, and our bodies are supposed to work. We're at this sort of lower level of stress all the time. So we've not got these peaks and troughs. We're at a lower level of stress, and our bodies aren't built to manage that as effectively. So the tools and techniques that I teach are helping people to most manage their bodies manage that process themselves, switch it on ourselves rather than relying for that automatic change that might never happen. And of course, these days, the stresses are often things like, here's another email, here's another thing to add on my to-do list. Oh, I've got another meeting to run to. Someone said something mean to me. It's not life-threatening stuff, but the amygdala still responds in the same way, which is why we face so much stress and challenge in our lives these days.
And the amygdala, of course, is that more primal part of the brain, isn't it? It's the more
Yes.
emotion-driven part of the brain rather than the logic part, that executive functioning
Yes.
prefrontal cortex, which
Yes,
when we're
exactly.
stressed and the amygdala takes over, that prefrontal cortex becomes a bit redundant, doesn't it? It loses
Yes.
its ability to do its job as well as it should. Most people, I think, have probably heard of the chimp paradox with the two different
Mm,
parts of the brain, or three different parts of the brain. And we don't think clearly, which just exacerbates the problem,
yes.
doesn't it? So when it comes to that sort of bringing us back into the moment, surely, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here, but we can't live in the moment every single minute of the day. That would be exhausting, would it not?
Yes, exactly. So what we're trying to do is we a lot of people use mindfulness through meditation, so they access the mindful state of awareness through meditating, and that's what I do, that's what a lot of people do. We do it every day, and it's really beneficial because it sets you up for the day for that more self-awareness, that ability to self-regulate yourself through emotions and distress, and to manage your thoughts and have a different relationship with your thoughts and your relationship with people around you too. But obviously not everyone's going to be able to meditate. It doesn't suit everybody, and you can't fit it into the day. And likewise, you can't just be mindful every moment of every day. But what we're doing when we access mindfulness tools and techniques, so it's not just about meditation, there's tools and techniques that you can use, like breathing practices that maybe just take a minute, or just a few deep breaths, or just send all of your energy down into your feet for a few moments and feel the sense of support from the ground underneath you. Those sort of really teeny tiny little actions we can take bring us back into the moment very quickly, coming back to our body or our sensory senses. All of those things pop us straight back into the moment. So when we can start to integrate those across our working day, across our habitual habits that we go through all day, either at work or at home, we can start to bring the benefits of mindfulness into the working day or into our home lives very quickly and easily, without having to roll out the old meditation mat and sort of find half an hour a day to go and meditate. So that's what I try to do when I work with organizations. I'm giving them changes they can make into their culture, into processes, into their working day, that they can start to use to integrate those benefits, so they don't have to go off and meditate and find extra time, because that's the challenge, right? No one's got enough time anyway. We're all so busy and overworked and pressured and overwhelmed at work that, the idea of having 20 minutes free to go and sit and be quiet is just unrealistic for
Mm.
most of us, and undesirable too. But you can have, while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, or in those sort of transition periods of the day when you're walking from one meeting to another, or even when you're going through a doorway, you can use that as a reminder to just pop yourself back into the moment. So come back to the body, the senses, your breathing, and use those as opportunities to just give your mind a little break and have a little check-in. And so what we're doing often with mindfulness is we're putting a little pause into the moment we're living, and that pause allows us to recognize we're in the amygdala. It allows the prefrontal cortex that you explained earlier on to come back online, and then we can access those deeper resources and that knowledge and that cognitive ability that we have that we lose in those moments of stress. It can be as quick as just a few deep breaths, and then you can access your prefrontal cortex again.
How receptive do you find businesses are to the idea of mindfulness or brain-based practices? Do they get it? Have we moved on sufficiently in workplace culture that they understand that sometimes they've got to let their people slow down to be able to speed up and get more done? Because I know from my own ways of working that I can get very hyper focused on things and I can get very overwhelmed with everything that's going on. And in that moment, it feels almost impossible to
Mm,
stop, go and do something different, or switch off, or take my mind somewhere that isn't the
mm,
task at hand. But I know, at a logical level, I know that if I take that step back, if I just do a bit of intentional breathing, or and one of the practices that I try and do, and I don't want to steal your thunder in case this is one you're going to share, but I try and think, okay, if I'm getting a bit stressed, let's look at 5 things I can see, a few things I can hear, a few things I
yes.
can smell, etc.
Mm,
And it takes half a minute, really. It doesn't take
yes.
long at all. But my mind is thinking, how comfortable are organizations with having their people stop what they're doing to take a moment or a 5 minute or a
Hmm.
10 minute? Is there still a little bit of pushback around they're not on it, they've got to be on it all the time?
Yeah. I guess it depends on the organization, right? That's the answer you're probably expecting. But I think generally people are more understanding of the impact of poor mental health at work, of the importance of well-being at work, the importance of resilience and emotional intelligence in the workplace. So I think if you use that sort of language that's calling to their challenges they're facing or the problems they've come across. So I rarely say, do you want me to have you some mindfulness? I don't really use the term mindfulness because people often just associate that with the old meditating quietly in a room on your own, and they don't appreciate the importance of the important impact it can bring on your own self-regulation, but also how you work with the people around you, the impact it can have on the organization. So I suppose what I'm finding is organizations are more receptive to the idea of allowing people to focus on well-being at work and self-care at work. They see mindfulness as a route into that sometimes. They often think, oh, I suppose two things that come across often are, oh, it's stress awareness week. Can you just, or stress awareness month or mental health awareness week? We probably ought to do something. Can you do something for us then? So obviously that's it's a little bit depressing because that's a little bit of a check, feels a little bit like a checkbox exercise. But nonetheless, it gives people the chance to experience it. And I think once people have experienced the power of mindfulness or some of these mind-based tools and they feel the difference, then that's when it becomes an easier sell for them and for their organizations. But it's interesting that often it's well-being that gets me through the door rather than some of the broader effects and the more helpful impact from mindfulness in an organization once it's embedded in the culture is the improvement in performance, high performing teams, the cohesion across teams, the relationships with customers and team members, the if impact on the bottom line, staff retention, people staying for longer, people feeling more valued at work, so productivity driving engagement, elevating, all of those things that organizations probably really want, they don't yet link mindfulness to that often. But going back to my original story when I was talking about that conference, they were very clear that they had got impact on the bottom line, which is why I was so passionate, because actually I love mindfulness, but I'm not really about helping individuals about mindfulness because they're depressed or I'm not coming at it from a sort of health and social well-being route, which lots of mindfulness practitioners are. I'm really keen that I want to get into helping organizations transform their working place, their working cultures, giving people the skills and tools they need to protect their well-being, but also do well, be at their best while they're at work, because that's what drives productivity, performance, profitability. And that was my experience. That wasn't the case. And so that's why I fell over. And I don't want other people to have that experience when there's simple things that can help.
This is a business benefit. Yes, it's
Yes.
beneficial to your individual employees, but without the well-being of your individual employees, your business is going to suffer. It's not rocket science, really, when you think about it, is it?
It isn't. It really isn't.
But yes, this idea that it's when you look after the well-being of your people, you're looking after the well-being of your business. The two are
Mm,
intrinsically linked. I'm interested, though, one of the things that used to come up when I was doing more on the menopause space, I'd have people say, "Oh, how do you go about convincing businesses who don't get it that they need you to come in and train their people or their managers or raise awareness?"
mm,
My answer to that was always, it's not my job to try and convince businesses that this is important. If they're not getting, that's not my role to
mm.
convince. I always used to joke that if they were a bit of a dinosaur company, and with dinosaur thought patterns in their business, a dinosaur
Yes.
culture, that they'll probably die out as a business in the way
Will
that
it
the
become
dinosaurs
extinct?
did. And I just
Yeah.
wonder how many dinosaur companies you have convinced, or are you of a similar mind to me that actually you want to work with the companies that get this?
I suppose it's a really interesting question, and it's not something that I've really considered. I think because the route I'm finding in is dealing with the challenges that people are facing. And my experiences was in the voluntary sector, the charity sector. Lots of my clients have been from that sector, and I understand the challenges they're in. They often come to me when something's gone
Mm.
wrong. So not the preventative stuff, but the reactive. Oh, something's gone wrong in our world or in our organization or with our beneficiaries, and suddenly they need some help. I suppose that's often the entry point for me, which isn't ideal, but you're still getting people to tip their toe in then, and then that's it becomes more easy to sell programs and to get buy-in when people have had a personal experience. And so, for instance, I'm working with a group of a customer at the moment, and someone came along. She gave a testimonial at the end of the session to her manager, not to me, but they've sent it on to me. And she said, "Oh, I really was in two minds about attending this session because it was a 45-minute session. The organization's really trying to promote people to come because they're going through a really emotionally difficult, challenging time in the organization. So they really are keen on pushing self-care and well-being. And this individual said, I was in two minds whether to come. I haven't got time. I'm just so busy. I really can't take 45 minutes out of my day. And in all of the literature that I'd shared, the communication I'd shared with the organization and the organization themselves had shared, they said, this is really important. We really want you, we're investing in you and your self care. We want you to attend. But even they said that she still didn't want to come. And something made her come. So she chose to come along. And she said she had not thought about how taking 45 minutes today would help the rest of her week and would help her build reserves of resilience and self care that she could then keep drawing on several weeks
Mm.
later. And she actually said 45 minutes in the session with me. And it was a 45-minute session, but obviously some of that's welcoming people, explaining, instructing. So we probably practiced three different techniques that session. And they were probably it's often new people to mindfulness, so I can't do a 20-minute meditation. So we probably did a breathing practice for 5 or 6 minutes. We probably did a micro practice for maybe 8 or 9 minutes, and then a meditation for 6 or 7. So she didn't even do that much actual practice, but she said her productivity soared for the whole of the rest of the day from just a 45-minute chance to sit down quietly, try some new things. And so that's when I'm teaching people mindfulness in organizations, I'm really giving them tools. So even when they're coming for a tick box exercise, which is slightly disappointing, they've got tools that they can take away and just start using straight away, both at work and at home. I often get feedback, they share them with family and friends. I often get feedback from leaders, senior leaders. Like one exercise I do almost at the start of every workshop or program I deliver is let's just sit and have a moment silence, a moment to arrive. It's just an acknowledgement that we've all come from different places. You know how busy it is in work days these days. People are at meetings, they're rushing around, they're running from one task to another, and suddenly they've got to turn up at this Zoom call with me. So I give them 1 minute to just sit quietly, still, in stillness and silence, focus on their breath, and I time it on a little clock. It's called a moment to arrive. And then at the end of that 1 minute, it just sounds ridiculous, right? 1 minute of sitting in silence. Some of them actually say, that's the first moment I've had to myself today. This might be at the end of the working day. It's just crazy, right? And even that 1 minute feels transformational. Someone described it as an out of body experience,
Wow, that's
just
so
sitting
powerful.
quietly for 1 minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you build that in to imagine if you built that into the start of every meeting, this is what I recommend. Build that into the start of every meeting, every team event, every activity. 1 minute acknowledges that people have got scattered attention. They're thinking about what they've just been doing. They're wondering about what's next. And just let them bring all of their attention, all their focus into the minute, so that in the minute we're in, the moment we're in, so they can start to get ready to focus on what's next. And it's just so powerful. So, yeah, that's how I end up um, buying people into mindfulness. I give them the experience, I give them the taste of it, they get to feel it, and then they understand.
Yeah, and it's
But
interesting actually because I did an awful lot of sort of 1 hour awareness webinars
mm,
or 1 hour sessions, 60, 90-minute sessions. And I've spoken to lots of people who are wellness practitioners going into business, and they refuse to do that because they feel
mm,
it's a tick in the box exercise. And let's
yes,
be honest,
yeah,
sometimes it is. Sometimes
it is.
organizations just want to be seen to be doing the right thing. But for me, I think it's not ideal. You can't really create great behavior change or attitudinal changes
Mm,
in a 60-minute webinar, but you can absolutely get people to start thinking a bit differently. And it's
exactly.
that knock-on effect. You've got that lady who had some major shifts in a 45-minute session,
Mm,
feeding that back to her manager. That's powerful stuff. And you
exactly.
would hope that the organization will realize that actually maybe there's more to this, and maybe we need to get Karen back in and do some more stuff to take us to the next level, because if that's what you can achieve in 45 minutes, what on earth could you
Yes,
achieve in 6 months or 12 months
exactly.
working with a team of managers? I think it's so powerful. And that 1 minute,
Mm,
I think back to my days when I was working for the Royal Air Force, and we'd have a 2-minute silence or remembrance
yes,
day.
yes.
And it could be my ADHD brain, there could be a little bit of that as well, but I would find that 2 minutes really difficult to
Mm,
stop and switch off. And even when I had something as powerful as Remembrance Day and those reflections that I could sit with, I still found that really difficult because
yeah,
there's this sort of feeling of pressure to not waste a minute of our day.
yes.
And it's a mind shift, isn't it? That actually taking that a minute to arrive or that moment to arrive, it's not time wasted. It's such an important grounding, getting us back to, I guess, getting everybody in the meeting to a place of calm where they can start to bring in that executive functioning part of the brain and actually
Yeah.
work more coherently together from a place of calm. I love it. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Something I've noticed recently, and I'm just noodling on this. I haven't decided what it means yet, but I'm really noticing recently that whenever I talk to people, whether that's my family, people, customers, or colleagues, peers, even people at networking meetings, and someone says, "Oh, how are you?" or "How's things?" People always say, "It's busy," or "I'm busy," and it's almost as if we're trained that we have to feel like we're busy, or we have to say that, or that somehow busyness is valued more importantly than everything else, because they don't necessarily say it as a negative. Oh, I'm so busy. I'm busy. Look at me. I'm so good at my job.
Mm,
I'm busy. I'm busy. I'm busy. As if busy is like this huge value we're all trying to strive for. And actually, who said busy was so important? And you remember there was, I don't know, was this back in the 80s? They used to say things like time is money.
yeah.
It's rubbish. No one's bothered about time like that in a critical moment of their lives, or yeah, on their deathbed. No one's going, "Oh, I wish I'd have worked harder and spent more time at work or been busier." That's not what people want. Connection, they want experiences, they want relationships. People don't want this sense of busyness, yet it's what everyone says. It's an interesting, yeah, I'm really going to be spending more time thinking about it and
Mm.
reflecting on it, because, and I find I say it too sometimes. I just find myself saying it, "Oh, I'm busy," or it's so busy.
If you say, I'm not busy, it's almost like you're saying, I'm failing in my business, or if I'm
Yes.
not busy
Yeah.
at work, then I'm lazy or I'm not doing what I should be doing.
Yes.
So I try now to reword that and say I'm busy enough, I'm busy enough.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm busy enough to keep,
Yeah.
for what I need, because actually I don't like being overly busy. I do get
No,
stressed and I do get overwhelmed, and I do find
exactly.
that I when I'm overly busy and overwhelmed, I don't get much done. It's not a productive
Yes.
time. In fact, I'm thinking of your brain-based tools. They're really brain-based productivity tools, aren't they? Because the tools that
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
using actually help people to be more productive rather than less productive. And I know I have warned you about this, I'm not putting you completely on the spot, to ask you to share maybe a tool that we can do here on the
Yeah.
podcast. So if anybody's listening to it, they can
Yes.
have a go. Now, do I need to caveat this with if you're driving or handling heavy machinery, don't do this?
Yes.
Is that
Yes, exactly. Definitely caveat it with that. No driving for this technique. What I thought I'd share is because I know your background, you've mentioned ADHD. So I work with an organization called ACDH. So whenever I say it, I'm like, oh, which one have I
way too
used?
many acronyms
Don't want
at
to talk
all
about
sound
those.
the same.
Don't want to talk about those dogs and cats. It's the Association of Dogs and Cats Homes. So I don't want to be like accusing you of having ADHD when it's ACDH. Anyway,
Yeah.
ADHD. Part of my toolkit is some neurodiversity informed mindfulness techniques because there's so much prevalence of neurodiversity in the workplace these days. And you know better than me that as particularly ladies get older and their hormones change and they go through these changes, that becomes more apparent. And so sometimes people are getting late diagnosis of ADHD and similar. I think they're all on a spectrum anyway. I don't know enough about them, but I feel like they're all on a spectrum and we're all somewhere on that spectrum. But anyway, I've learned some really wonderful neurodiversity informed mindfulness techniques that everyone I've shown so far has absolutely loved them. And for me, the one I'm going to share with you today, when I use it for just a few minutes, it's as if I've been sat in meditation for half an hour. I can feel that sort of level of presence and that profound benefit from just doing this for a few minutes. I love it. So I'm not a neuroscientist, as I said earlier on. I don't really understand why these are so powerful for people with neurodivergent conditions, but they are. And I think it's something to do with it's an element of choice. So we're giving your brain the chance to choose out of maybe two or three different ways to focus in this particular activity. So it's given it a little task to do. So it's less likely to ruminate or worry. So you're able to focus more because there's two things you're focusing on. I don't really understand it, but this is what happens. So it's called lotus flower breathing. And we're just going to sit and breathe, focus on our breath. Are you comfortable focusing on your breath,
Yeah.
Beth?
Yeah.
Yes, so some people aren't. So if people find that triggering, then don't focus on the breath. This probably isn't the practice for you, but we focus on our breathing.
Can I
We're
stop
not
you there
necessarily,
before we keep going? Why
yes.
why would that be a problematic? So I don't have a problem focusing on my breathing, but I really have a struggle if I have to. Sometimes we have breathing exercises where you take a deep breath in and you have to hold it at the top for any length of time and then release it and then hold it
Mm,
at the bottom. I get a bit panicky with the breath
yes,
holding, but I don't have a
yes,
problem focusing on the breath. Is it I'm taking us on a little aside before you get going with your lotus breathing.
yes,
Is there any kind of understanding of
yeah.
why that would happen?
So oftentimes when people focus on the breathing, several things can happen, but one of the things, especially if they've been through trauma, so they've got unresolved trauma in their bodies, or they've had some traumatic or abusive experience that's not been resolved, or they've got, it's another acronym, post traumatic
PTSD?
PTSD, something like that, focusing on the breath inside the body can be very triggering and can start to release emotions and stir up feelings and trauma in the body. And also, with all of these practices that I teach, I'm striving to make them accessible to everyone. So focusing on the breath can bring feelings of anxiety. It can start to people panic about why is my breathing not quite right? We breathe all day, every day without ever thinking about it usually. But if you start to focus on it, sometimes people can start feeling anxious. It's not right. I can't breathe out. I can't breathe in. It's too long, and start to get really worried and overly concerned about it. So it's really helpful for trauma sensitive mindfulness to give them an option to focus on the physical part of the body instead, or outside the body, which is what we're going to do now.
Okay.
But we're going to do both. We're going to do breath and outside the body.
Okay.
But it's really important that people individualize the practice to what suits them, because everyone's got different abilities, different minds, different sensory experiences. So it's really important whenever you're doing a mindfulness practice or a brain-based practice is to individualize it to a way that suits you. So, and if it doesn't feel comfortable, then it's really interesting, because if it doesn't feel comfortable, often that's our brains resisting something new. So you can sit with the discomfort and try and work through it a little bit. And if it becomes triggering and difficult and challenging, then I'd say take a pause and come back later on when you've calmed down. But yeah, this one hopefully won't do that. But it's worth checking, right? I don't want you to suddenly have an uncomfortable experience on this podcast.
Okay, I'm all yours.
Okay. If you can sit straight with your back straight but not stiff, your feet ideally flat on the floor beneath you, just to give your body a bit of stability as we go through the practice. And then I'll explain what we're going to do, and then we'll do it. So we're going to breathe, and then we're going to move our hands. So I'll hold my hands like this, and we'll open our hands on the in-breath, and we'll close our hands on the out-breath. I'm just doing it like this so you can see what I'm doing. You can have it in the hands in your lap. You can just do one hand or even just one finger. But the thing is, you're moving your hands at the same speed as the breath. So as we breathe in, we open our hands, and as we breathe out, we close our hands. Okay?
Okay, I'll do it here. So
All right then.
I'm watching.
So just get yourself comfortable. Take any little last minute movements. You can do this with your eyes open or closed, or if you keep them open, taking a soft downward gaze is quite helpful, so it stops any of that peripheral distraction around you. I'll close mine. I'll keep them open so I can keep my eye on you. Okay, you just start to become aware of your breathing. So not using the hands at this point, just starting to become aware. So you start to notice the in-breath, and you start to notice the out-breath. So not changing the rhythm of your breathing in any way, just watching, becoming aware. And I've just realised for the podcast viewers that might be just listening, they didn't see me doing my hand movements, so I shall make sure I describe them better when we go through the practice. So just breathing in and breathing out, so just allowing our minds and our bodies to start to settle. And then when you're ready, just using your hands. So you start with your hands in a sort of closed fist position. You can use both hands or one hand or just a finger. You can have the hands in front of you or on your lap, whichever's best for you. And as we start to breathe in, we're just going to open our hands out wide. So if you imagine a lotus flower, this is the petals of the lotus just opening in the morning when the sun hits it. And then as we breathe out, just closing the hands back down into that fist. It doesn't have to be a tight fist, just that sense of opening and closing the hands. So breathing in, hands open. Breathing out, hands close. Breathing in, hands open. And breathing out, hands close. So our brains at this point are focusing on the breath in the body, but also the movement of the hands. So they're focusing on two different things. And then when we bring some mindfulness to the movement, so we start to try to really synchronize the movement with the breath. So just at the second that you start to breathe in, your hands start to open. And then just when you stop the in-breath, your hands stop moving. And then as soon as you start to breathe out, your hands start to close. And they close at the same time that you stop breathing out. So just try that on your own for a few breaths in and out. And just use the rhythm that works for you. And if you find your mind has wandered off onto questioning whether you're doing this right or wrong, or planning or thinking, and just bringing your attention back to the hands and to the breath. Opening on the in-breath, closing on the out-breath. And then when you're ready, just finishing the movement and then coming back to the screen when you're ready. I'd like to just take a few more movements. So I obviously had a very short process for us then.
How long would you normally do that for?
Well, I mean, I do it sometimes for 10 or 15 minutes because I find it really supportive. So sometimes, even though I meditate every day, I sometimes still struggle to focus or get into it or feel like I want to do it. And so I find this very supportive. So I don't know whether I've got ADHD or not. Maybe we'll find I have soon. But at the moment, I still find it really supportive. So I use it a lot. But actually, you could just use it for 2 or 3 breaths, however long. It's
Mm.
about individualizing it. Find what works for you. It's harder for me when I'm talking you through it. I'm not feeling it because I'm talking
Yeah.
you. But even when I stopped talking and we did it in silence, I could feel the benefit almost immediately. Just a few moments. And you could even, you're sat in a meeting, everyone's talking over each other, you feel the stress rising and triggering, starting to get anxious, or you're just about to go onto a stage and talk to a group of people. Just doing this for a few minutes or even a minute while you wait could be really helpful.
I think what I like about it is with a very activity driven brain, I always say my brain feels like I've got 20 computer tabs open at any one time.
Yeah.
It feels like having 2 things to do. It does help because it
Mm,
gives me something, yeah, for my brain to deal with. Because I do find when I meditate, I struggle with meditation. I try my
mm,
best. I've accepted now that it's a practice, and some days I can sit and really get into it, and I feel like I get so much out of it, and other days, probably the days I need it most, I just can't settle
mm.
my brain, and I feel this I am familiar with this lotus breathing. Deborah in our group has done this with us before, and,
Oh, has she?
the fact
Mm,
that you've both chosen this technique tells me it's probably a good one, that it does
yeah.
what it's meant to do. So I am familiar with it. You've just reminded me that I haven't been using it, and maybe I
Mm,
should. But I think I like the fact that yes, my ADHD brain needs it doesn't shut down. It never shuts down, but
yes.
it does help me to channel it, and I think it feels like something I'm very rhythmic. I love music
Mm,
with strong rhythm,
music and dance and
from
stuff.
a percussive sort of point of view. I prefer percussion to
Mhm.
melody. I feel as if I sat listening to a bit of music, I could be doing this to the music, and it would help
Yes.
as well. That was fabulous.
Yeah,
Really,
exactly.
really enjoyed that.
I was gonna something so when you've got that one of those, I don't know about ADHD particularly, but my experience is when you've got a really busy mind, what can really help in those instances, if you can't settle in meditation, which is quite hard if you've got a really busy mind, just to sit quietly can be really difficult. I find coming to the body much more helpful. So doing a body scan or just sending my energy down into my feet. But the other one that I use, which really then helps me focus, is to do mindfulness of sound. So I just forget that I'm trying to be quiet and I just tune into the noise around me and I use that as the meditation. So I listen out and I notice whatever's there. So it might be ambient noise in the background all the time. It might be a quick sound that just drops in and then drops out. It might be something, but just noticing sound around you. I find that is a really good way when I've got a really busy mind to just get into the
Mm.
meditation. And then once I'm in there, then I can explore something else if I want to. But actually, I find sounds very helpful as well as accessing the body. Yeah.
What I loved about the lotus exercise is just the simplicity of it.
Yeah.
I know you have a whole toolbox full of little tools. Are they all pretty easy to implement?
I think they are. I think they are. What I want to do is teach people something that they can pick up and feel like they can just do it in their own time in their day when it suits them. They don't have to go and listen to me teaching them. They don't need a really complicated meditation that's going to take them forever or they need to always be guided for. The benefit really is being able to do these practices yourself. So that's why I try to teach really simple ones. Some of them I do guide people through, and some of them not so much. The meditations I guide people through, but once you know them, you can do them yourself, like a body scan. You could once you've done it a few times, you know how to do it. But the micro practices I teach, which I often teach for organizations, are just 2 to 3 minute long practices. So they're very easy. Some of them are acronyms. So if you can remember the acronym, you can do it yourself. But actually, even if you just do a part of it, it's part of the way you're part of the way there. If you take the moment to stop and pause and listen and check in and see what's going on with my thoughts, what's my emotions saying, what are the sensations in my body telling me. It doesn't really matter if you haven't finished STOP or whatever it is what I'm trying to teach you.
Mm.
If you've just checked in, you're going to start getting the benefit straight away. So there isn't anything over most. It's really interesting, and I don't know why this is, but almost all of the practices that I teach that have got an acronym, it's always like 4-letter acronym, so it's pretty simple. Or like a six, I do one that's a 6. It used to be 4, and I've amended it to a
Mm.
6 um, letter acronym. So yeah, I think even if you don't, I think the point is if you can remember to try something and give it a go and integrate it and use it during your day, it doesn't really matter if you don't quite get it right. You've just got to take that moment for yourself.
Mm. I guess even the
Mm,
process of thinking about the mindfulness exercise is bringing you into the moment because you're thinking about the
exactly.
mindfulness exercise. Karen, how
Yes.
do businesses get in touch with you? Do you only work with businesses or do you work with individuals at all as well?
I mostly work with organizations, but actually, what I've been finding, because I do a lot of workshops and courses and sessions with organizations, and then people say, oh, oftentimes, like we said earlier on, the business isn't in the right place yet to bring me in for a longer program, or we finish a program and then their budgets are a bit tight, or another emerging priorities coming along. And so individuals are often then saying to me, what can I do? How can you continue to support me? I've got a mailing list for individuals. So I provide tips, tools, practices, invitations to free mindfulness events with me, which I run once a month on a Friday lunchtime. So for individuals, I've got that, and I've done a soft launch. It's not widely launched yet of an individual membership as well. So people will be able to pay to come and drop in every week to join me for a meditation. So
Yes.
that's hot off the
Hot off
press.
the press.
With
Brilliant.
businesses is where I do most of my work. I've got the website, which is thekjway.co.uk. And also for both businesses and individuals, they can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm at the KJ Way, or on Facebook, which is mindfulness the KJ Way.
Brilliant. I'll put
And
all of
if
those
you,
details.
yeah, I
Yeah.
guess you'll have links. So I can put
Yeah.
you a link to the mailing list as well, and then people can find that very
Yeah.
easily.
I'm just
So
really,
those are the ways.
yeah, I'm really keen to let any of my listeners who might work within organizations to know how to promote you to their HR department or their wellbeing lead, because I think what you're doing is so important. And
Mm,
I think there are lots of ways that employers can support their people. And when I was doing the menopause stuff, yeah, it was probably, although I talked to everybody, predominantly it was seen as a female issue. But mindfulness
mm,
isn't gender specific, it's not age specific,
no.
it's relevant and beneficial to everybody regardless of seniority, anybody
Yes,
really, isn't it? So I'm very keen
exactly.
that organizations or anybody listening who has a lot of my listeners are probably still people who I worked with previously. Any last thoughts? If you could give us, I get you've been very generous in sharing a free tool with us, but if
Hmm.
you could give us one little tip around, that's what I would love you to do. Give me a tip to help my ADHD
Yes,
menopausal brain actually remember in the moment to do these things. How can I do that?
yes.
That's put you on the
Well,
spot.
yeah, no, it's fine. I'm asked this all the time, so it's fine. So either you build it into your routine so it's so familiar to you that you wouldn't forget it. So we all know to brush our teeth twice a day or more without even thinking about it. We're just habituated it. So find a time in your day where you would automatically have a space for a minute or two where you can just do a mindfulness practice. And if you can't do that, because it's hard and there's always lots of demands on our time. And my well-being process started at about 20 minutes a day and now can easily last 2.5 hours a day because there's so much that everyone wants me to do and that I like and I try and appreciate that isn't for everybody. So the other thing to do is find a trigger point to act as a reminder. So whether it's flicking the kettle on, that's what I often say, or running up the stairs, or getting in the car and turning the
Running up
ignition
the
on,
stairs.
sitting at the traffic lights. The other one that I love, which every time I post this on social or anywhere, people always think, oh, this is an amazing idea. But the thing that used to really wind me up is if I'd go to an appointment, so with the chiropractor or the doctor, and they're always running late, right? They're always making you wait. So when you're in a moment of waiting, use that to do mindfulness. So I used to sit there and be really frustrated, start to feel really frustrated. I've made the time to get here. I've
Yeah.
got an appointment. I've rushed here to get here on time to respect your time, and you're making me late now, and you're not considering that I've got other things to. It used to really wind me up. So now, whenever I'm there waiting, I just close my eyes and I breathe, or I come into the body. And so waiting isn't frustrating me anymore. It's just actually a really nice way for me to tap into mindfulness.
Love it.
So I think those are the two things. Find a place in your day or in your week where it makes sense and you can add it into your routine and it just feels right. Or find a reminder in your day, something that you do 3 or 4 times a day, maybe, or even just once a day that triggers you to go, oh, mindfulness.
And I guess it's like any other habit, isn't it? You've got to keep reinforcing it until it
Keep
becomes,
trying it.
yeah, becomes second nature.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that you've just reminded me is it is a practice. You're not going to just do it once and then be mindful forever. You have to keep going at it, and you have. And this is almost what I love about it because every moment's different. Every time I do the same practice, it feels different because it's a different moment. My breath might be slightly different, or the external environment might be quite different, or where I am, or what I'm thinking about. So it's always new and exciting and different. So if you've got that element of curiosity and openness about it, you'll always get something from it. But just like when we say we want to get fit, physically fit, so you can't just go to the gym once and be like, yay, look at me, I've lost so much weight, I'm so strong and fit. You have to keep going. And so with mindfulness, you have to keep going. But remember that non-judgment bit. So if you miss it, or you can only do it once a week, or you do it a few times and then you fall off the wagon and you can't do it, you don't remember to do it again, don't be judgmental about that. You'd be like, oh, that's curious. I've stopped doing it. Let's try again. Every minute is a chance to start again and be mindful again.
I
So,
love that. I love that. I've got one last
yeah.
question, which I probably should have asked earlier, but I didn't think of it earlier. With hindsight, knowing what you know
Mm,
now, and thinking about this from a business perspective, what would you have wanted your manager to have done to support you? What would have been helpful to you? What could she have done?
yes. I think really it's a really difficult question to answer because I recognize now that I wasn't in the space. And so it would have been I needed to have that experience to set me on my right path. So I'm very grateful now about the whole situation. Like we said at the start, often your journey starts from a sort of moment of crisis, or something's gone wrong and it has the impetus for you to make a big change. And that's obviously what my soul and my heart needed. So I don't know that I'd want to go back and do it any differently, but I suppose in when I'm trying to teach people at work to be more mindful managers or compassionate leaders, what I want them to do is to have more self-awareness of themselves. And then when they've got more self-awareness, more equanimity, more resilient themselves, they can see what their team members need more easily and connect with that and have the space and time to explore that with them and
Mm,
understand what their needs are and help. But actually, she may well have said to me in that moment, what do you need from me? And I wouldn't have known the answer. And she might have said that, I can't remember. And I wouldn't have known the answer because I thought I was okay. And clearly I wasn't. So I think would have to have been a very different conversation. She would have had to have had a lot more of awareness about mental health needs were, and the behaviors that I was showing at work were down to the illness that I was struggling with, me being me. And she hadn't managed me that long enough to realize that. Having more awareness herself of her impact and the words that she was using and seeing the impact that was having on me might have made the situation
mm.
more differently.
Yeah,
But
I
I think
get
it's just taking the time and space.
I get that, and I guess with your knowledge now and understanding, there may have been, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but potentially more empathy towards her as a manager, and her having more empathy
Yes.
towards you and what you were going through. It's that whole culture, isn't it, of
Yes.
understanding.
Exactly.
Karen, thank you so much.
Exactly.
Thank you more than anything for really clarifying what mindfulness is, and especially how this can benefit businesses, because I think that's the bit that we may have missed. Really lovely to chat to you, and
You
yeah,
too.
we shall leave it there for it's a Friday afternoon, so we're gonna go off and have a lovely weekend, and I'll talk to you all again soon.